Okay, so for today's lesson, we're going to continue on solving for quadratic equations. But for today's lesson, I'm going to build on the box method and ones that require more factoring. Okay, so if you need to review your factoring of using the box method, you can just look at the notes, the packet that we have been using for the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So check that out first. Okay, so the general procedure for factoring these types are the same, okay, or solving in this case. So first we write it in standard form, equated to 0. Step number two, factor the equation that you have, and then set the factors to 0 and solve for x. And step number 3 is to state the solutions explicitly. Okay, so example number 1. The question is 3x squared plus 9x minus 12 is equal to 0. So by default, when you factor, always look for the greatest common factor first. So in this case, the greatest common factor is 3. So when we go ahead and factor this, we end up with, factor the 3 out, and we have x squared plus 3x minus 4. If we factor that, we end up with x plus 4, x minus 1. Okay. Now, one thing that you probably may have thought about is, what do you do with the 3? Okay. The 3 has no effect on the solution because the 3 is not dependent on x. So essentially what that means is the 3, you can just divide both sides by 3, and that basically just means the 3 has no effect. So looking at this, we have x plus 4 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0, and then x equals negative 4, x equals 1. That means for step number 3, x equals negative 4 or 1. That's the explicit solution. Okay, example number 2, the question reads 5x squared minus 20x minus 60 is equal to 0. Is this in standard form? Yes, is equal to 0. Yes, that means we proceed to step number 2 where you have to factor, equate, and solve. Okay, so the greatest common factor here is 5, so factor it out. You end up with x squared minus 4x minus 12. Okay, the 5, again, you can just move to the other side, doesn't matter. 0 divided by 5 is still just going to be 0, there's no effect. So you don't have, okay, as long as the number that you factor out is not x, you can ignore it. Okay, so when we factor this, we end up with 5 times x minus 6 times x plus 2. Again, the 5 doesn't matter, so that means x minus 6 is a term, a factor, so this one is equal to 0. Okay, x equals 6, or x plus 2 is equal to 0, so that means x is equal to negative 2. So my explicitly written solutions would be x is equal to 6 or negative 2. Now, example number 3, hey, these ones require the box method. So that just means you have to think about how do you do that? So the question reads 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. Okay, so again, AC, so 2 times negative 5 is negative 10, and b is equal to 3. So think about two numbers when you multiply to give you negative 10. When you add them together, it gives you 3. So that means my two numbers are 5 and negative 2. So in that case, 5 and negative 2, multiply by x, you get the diagonals, and 2x squared is up here, and negative 5 is over here. Okay, so go and factor this way, this way, this way, and this way. Okay, so we end up with saying x minus 1, 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. Okay, so what we need to do next is, that means this factor is equal to 0 or this factor is equal to 0. So that means x is equal to 1 or x equals to negative 5 halves. Again, explicitly write those numbers out. Okay, sorry. Example number 4, 8x squared minus 22x plus 5 is equal to 0. Is that in standard form? Yes. Is it equal to 0? Yes. And let's go ahead and factor this. Okay, we cannot, there's no greatest common factor here, so let's go ahead and do a times c. So 8 times 5 is 40. b is equal to negative 22. Think of two numbers when you multiply to give you 40. When you add them together, it's negative 22. It's going to be negative 20 and negative 2. So using the box method, okay, the diagonals is just a and c, and then this side here is the two factors we found. Okay, so go and factor this, factor this, factor this, factor this. Okay, make sure you double check. Okay, so the factored form would be 4x minus 1, 2x minus 5, and this is equal to 0. So 4x minus 1 equals 0, or 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. So that means x is equal to 1/4, or x equals to 5 halves. So I mean, explicitly written, you get x equals 1/4 or 5 halves. Okay, so this one requires a box method. 5 and 6 also may require the box method. Okay, but for example, 5 and 6, what we have here is you have terms on both sides. So that means you have to rewrite in standard form first before you proceed to actually factor and solve and then state your solutions. So over for this one here, we have 8x squared plus 3 is equal to 10x. So we're going to move the 10x to the left side. So that makes this 8x squared minus 10x plus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, so that means AC. Okay, first of all, there's no greatest common factor here, so let's just go ahead and do AB and AC and B. So A times C is 8 times 3 is 24. B is equal to negative 10. So think of two numbers when you multiply, you give you 24. And when you add them together, it gives you negative 10. So the numbers are negative 6 and negative 4. So put those in the diagonals, factor, and you end up with saying 2x minus 1 and 4x minus 3 is equal to 0. So the first factor, 2x minus 1 equals 0, or the second factor, 4x minus 3 is equal to 0. So solving for that, you end up with x equals 1/2 or x equals to 3/4. Okay, remember, explicitly write out your solutions. Okay, example number 6. Okay, 3x squared plus 7x is equal to negative 2. So let's go look at this. Let's go ahead and rewrite this in standard form and equate it to 0. So in that case, standard form, we're going to move the 2 to the other side. So 3x squared plus 7x plus 2 is equal to 0. So it's in standard form is equal to 0. We're good. Do I have a greatest common factor here? No. So let's go ahead and use the box method. So 3 times 2 is 6, and then b is equal to 7. So think of two numbers when you multiply to give you 6, and the same numbers when you add them together, it's equal to 7. So in that case, we have the two factors are 6 and 1. So box method, plug it in, factor, and we end up with 3x plus 1 and x plus 2. And then that's equal to 0. So first factor equals 0 or second factor equals 0. So we end up with x is equal to negative 1/3 or x equals negative 2. And then that's the solution to these 6 examples. Okay, so that's all I have for today's lesson. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Otherwise, go work on take notes and then complete the task for the day. All right, see ya. Have a good break, by the way.